The air smelled like dust and memory when Ethan stepped into the lawyer's office that morning, unaware that his inheritance was already gone. He had come to sign transfer papers, believing the old farmhouse and the 10 acres around it, his grandfather's parting gift, were safely his. But when he saw his father's signature on the bill of sale, his breath caught in his throat. The lawyer looked uneasy, papers trembling in his hand, while Margaret Cole stood near the window, her posture tight, her eyes avoiding her son's. "It was for the family," she said softly, the kind of softness that cuts deeper than anger. For Sophie's wedding, Ethan didn't speak. He looked at the contract again, tracing his grandfather's name printed faintly at the bottom, like a ghost, trying to intervene. The world around him dimmed. Only the echo of betrayal remained, hollow and steady, like the ticking of the lawyer's clock. Ethan drove home without turning on the radio, the sound of gravel under his tires filling the silence his parents had left behind. The old truck rattled as if it, too, was tired of carrying weight it didn't deserve. He passed the wide fields that once belonged to his grandfather, now trimmed and marked with sale signs. New owners waiting to move in. Each post stabbed the earth like a reminder that something sacred had been traded away for decorations and champagne. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles blanched, and his reflection in the cracked side mirror looked older than 28. The farmhouse sat quiet when he arrived, its porch sagging slightly under the weight of years. Inside, dust floated in still air, the smell of motor oil and old wood blending into something achingly familiar. He walked through each room like he was saying goodbye to ghosts. The kitchen where his grandfather taught him how to sand down a rifle, the living room where they watched rainstorms roll in. In the back room, he found the old chest that Harold had left him, unopened. The key still hung on a nail by the window. He stared at it, unsure if he wanted what waited inside or if opening it feel like admitting it was all truly gone. That night, his phone buzzed on the counter. Sophie's name lit up the screen. For a moment, he considered letting it ring out, but something in him, duty, made him answer. Her voice was bright, full of the excitement of fittings and floral arrangements. She didn't mention the land, the sale, or what their parents had done. "You come, right?" she asked. "You're still my brother." Ethan stared at the empty kitchen table where his grandfather used to sit, his voice low, and even when he finally replied, "I'll think about it." Then silence, a small click, the kind of pause that feels like goodbye. When the call ended, Ethan walked to the back room again. Moonlight spilled through the window, tracing the dust in silver. He took the key from its nail and fit it into the chest's lock. It turned easily, as if waiting for him. Inside lay old photographs, medals, a folded letter sealed with red wax. Harold's handwriting on the envelope read, "To be read when the time is right." Ethan held it for a long time, heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Outside, the wind moved through the dry corn like the whisper of someone long gone. 3 days later, Ethan walked into his parents' house for the first time since the sale. The smell of lilies and perfume hit him before he even crossed the threshold. His mother had turned their modest living room into a floral showroom for Sophie's wedding planning. Sophie was sitting at the table, laughter bubbling as she compared invitation samples with Margaret, both too absorbed to notice him at first. When they finally did, the room stiffened. Margaret's smile was practiced. Sophie's faded into something uncertain. Ethan stood there, grease-stained hands shoved in his jacket pockets, a man out of place in his own family. The silence that followed was polite, brittle, and louder than any argument could ever be. The boutique smelled of tulle and expensive air. Sophie twirled before the mirror, her white dress sweeping the floor like a cloud she didn't yet deserve. Margaret watched proudly, a hand over her heart, whispering about how radiant her daughter looked. Ethan stood in the corner, dragged there under the pretense of family input. He said nothing, only studied the reflection of his sister's joy, a joy that rested on what was stolen from him. Sophie caught his gaze in the mirror, her smile faltering for a heartbeat before she looked away. Later that evening, Margaret found Ethan outside in the garden, cigarette smoke curling against the pink dusk. "You think I wanted this," she said, voice trembling with the effort to sound calm. "It was a choice, Ethan, for the family's future." He didn't look at her, only stared at the fading horizon. "You sold what wasn't yours to sell," he said quietly. "You chose Sophie's comfort over my respect." The words landed between them like stones in still water. Margaret's composure cracked, but pride stitched it back before tears could fall. "You'll understand one day," she whispered. "No," Ethan said. "You just hope I will." That night, Sophie knocked on Ethan's door. She didn't step inside, just stood in the hallway clutching her phone, face pale, eyes glistening. "I didn't know they'd sell the land," she whispered. "Mom just said it was for expenses. I didn't ask questions." Ethan studied her expression, the guilt blooming behind her practiced poise. "You didn't want to know," he said. Sophie's lip trembled. "I thought they'd fix it before you found out." She tried to smile, but the weight of her own complicity broke her voice. For the first time, she looked like the little sister he used to protect, not the woman his parents had turned into a symbol. The next morning, Ethan found a stack of wedding invitations on the kitchen counter. His name was on one, handwritten, gold, embossed, polite as a stranger's letter. He turned it over in his hands, reading the address of the venue, the elegant script of his sister's joy. Margaret entered the room quietly, watching him. "We hope you'll come," she said, not asking, just stating it like a challenge. Ethan placed the card down carefully, almost reverently, and replied, "I'll be there." His tone was calm, but the promise carried something else, an ending waiting to happen. The night before the wedding, the Cole family gathered around the long dining table for what was supposed to be a celebration. Candlelight flickered across polished silverware, and strained smiles. The air felt too thick, heavy with everything unsaid. Daniel poured himself another drink before the prayer even ended, his hand shaking slightly. Sophie tried to fill the silence with wedding details, her laughter light but hollow. Margaret corrected her tone, straightened napkins, and smiled through clenched teeth. Ethan sat opposite them, barely touching his food, watching a family pretend it hadn't already broken. When his mother asked if he was proud of his sister, he met her eyes and said simply, "I'm proud of Grandpa." The clink of silverware stopped. No one spoke again after that. After dinner, Ethan stepped out to the driveway for air, the night cold and still. He was lighting a cigarette when Daniel followed, jacket thrown over his shoulders. "You think I wanted this?" his father asked, voice thick with alcohol. Ethan exhaled smoke slowly. "You didn't stop it." Daniel's eyes dropped, his words stumbling. "Your mother. She needed it to be perfect. For Sophie, for the family." Ethan looked at him for a long time, then said, "It was perfect before you sold it." The older man's face hardened, shame turning into defense. But Ethan was already walking away, the gravel crunching under his boots, louder than any apology could have been. Later, Ethan found himself standing outside Sophie's door. He heard soft music inside, the kind their mother used to play on Sunday mornings. When he knocked, she opened it in her robe, hair half pinned, eyes red. "You don't have to hate me," she whispered. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, tired but calm. "I don't," he said. "I just wish you'd seen what they took from both of us." Sophie blinked back tears, nodding faintly. "Tomorrow's supposed to be the happiest day of my life," she said. "Then why does it feel like I'm losing something?" Ethan didn't answer. He just looked at her the way he did when they were kids. Protective, disappointed, but still loving, and walked away without another word. When the house had gone quiet, Ethan took the sealed letter from his jacket pocket, the one from his grandfather's chest. The red wax glimmered faintly under his desk lamp. His hands hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside was a single page, folded once. The handwriting was old, steady. "If they ever take what's yours," it read, "know that what's truly yours cannot be sold." Beneath that, a line that stopped him cold. "The truth will find you when you sit before my lawyer." Ethan read it twice, heart pounding. He didn't know what truth meant yet, but for the first time in years, he felt something close to purpose. Outside, the night broke open with rain. Thunder rolled across the fields as if the sky itself was remembering what had been stolen. Ethan stood by the window watching the storm soak the earth his grandfather once tended. Lightning flashed, catching his reflection in the glass. His face, his father's, and something older, like Harold's quiet defiance. He knew tomorrow wouldn't just be Sophie's wedding. It would be the reckoning Harold promised, the one his parents never thought would come. As the storm raged, Ethan whispered to the dark, "Tomorrow, we finish this." Sunlight spilled softly over the manicured lawns of the wedding venue, painting Sophie's big day in gold. Inside the bridal suite, the bustle of hair, makeup, and silk gowns was almost deafening. Sophie floated between mirrors and dresses, her smile radiant yet hollow at the edges. Margaret fussed over every detail, measuring, adjusting, arranging, her control tangible in every gesture. Ethan watched silently from the corner, his hands stuffed in his pockets, heart heavy with the knowledge of what funded this day. Outside, groomsmen laughed, cars arrived, and the world moved as if nothing had broken. But inside, everything was poised on the knife edge of revelation. The guests began trickling in, laughter and greetings filling the garden. Friends and family alike, dressed in crisp suits and flowing dresses, murmured compliments to the bride and her mother. Ethan stepped to the side, watching faces blur with excitement, feeling the invisible wedge that money and favoritism had driven between him and the celebration. He caught Sophie's eye briefly. She looked both thrilled and terrified, as if she sensed the fracture that would never fully mend. Despite the festivities, the undercurrent of unease pulled at him like a tide he couldn't resist. The officiant's voice echoed through the open-air pavilion as Sophie's steps traced the path down the aisle. The white of her dress was pure, blinding against the green of the lawns. Ethan sat in the third row, hands clenched in his lap, stomach twisting with memories of his grandfather's land, the chest, and the letter. Margaret beamed with pride, but the lines around her eyes betrayed fatigue and worry. When Sophie reached the altar, she paused, eyes flicking toward Ethan for the briefest moment. The unspoken acknowledgement of everything sacrificed for this day suspended in the air like pollen. The world continued, oblivious, while hearts silently recalibrated. Dinner tables were arranged beneath twinkling fairy lights as the toasts began. Sophie's best friend gushed over childhood memories. Margaret's sister praised the family's unity. Ethan barely touched his glass, listening to laughter that didn't reach him. Every word felt like a mockery of the sacrifices he had silently endured. Sophie's eyes found his across the room once, guilt flickering like lightning in her gaze. Margaret noticed it too, adjusting her smile, but it didn't reach the tension coiling in Ethan's chest. The celebration glimmered on the surface, but beneath, a storm waited. Just as the first dance began, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Richard, the lawyer. He excused himself from the crowd, stepping toward the edge of the garden. "Ethan," the voice said, calm but urgent. "I need you to come to the office first thing tomorrow morning. It's about your grandfather's final letter." The music swelled behind him, blending with his heartbeat. He hung up and looked back at the twirling bride Sophie, unaware that the truth was about to pierce the celebration like a blade through silk. Ethan exhaled slowly, gripping the phone, realizing tomorrow the fragile mask of this day would shatter. The morning light in Richard Maynard's office was pale, muted, as though even the sun hesitated to witness what was about to unfold. Ethan walked in first, followed by his parents, Margaret and Daniel. and finally Sophie. The room smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Richard sat behind the desk, hands folded over a thick envelope sealed with crimson wax. "Your grandfather left instructions to be read today," he began. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Ethan felt his chest tighten, watching the careful composure of his family start to fray. He realized that every smile and excuse, every justifying word over the past weeks, had led to this moment, the unmasking of truth. Richard broke the wax seal carefully, unfolding the yellowed paper inside. The handwriting was unmistakable. Harold Cole, his voice resurrected through ink. He began to read aloud. "To my children, and to Ethan, my grandson, who carries more strength than he knows. The land you see sold was never meant to divide love. It was meant to teach integrity. Those who choose expedience over justice will find the truth returns to confront them. Ethan, what is rightfully yours extends beyond the fields and house. Sophie, your joy should never come at the expense of another's honor." As the words settled in the room, faces shifted. Margaret's lips pressed tight. Daniel's jaw clenched. Sophie's eyes brimmed with tears. Ethan's hands, trembling slightly, gripped the edge of the desk. Richard continued reading. "Margaret and Daniel, the choice to sell the land for Sophie's wedding was made without consulting Ethan. That choice betrayed the very principles I hoped to instill. But know this, Ethan's inheritance was never limited to money or property. Within this envelope he will find proof of his claim, a second portion of the estate held in trust, unknown to anyone but me, safeguarded until today." Shock silenced the room. Sophie gasped, stumbling back into a chair. Ethan's head lifted slowly, eyes glimmering with disbelief and a strange vindication. For years, he had been ignored, silenced, dismissed. But now, the weight of justice felt tangible in his hands. Richard slid another set of documents across the desk. Trust deeds, signatures, bank statements, all authenticated. "This," he said, "was your grandfather's plan. To ensure that honesty and patience prevail, even when family fails." Ethan's fingers trembled as he examined the papers, each signature a testament to what had been promised, each line a vindication of the silence and restraint he had maintained all these years. Sophie reached toward him, hesitant, voice small. "Ethan, I didn't know." He looked at her, the anger tempered by a deep understanding, and nodded slowly. "Now you know?" The room was quiet, as though the world itself paused to absorb what had happened. Margaret sat back, pale and trembling, realizing the consequences of her choices. Daniel stared at the floor, the weight of complicit silence pressing down on him. Sophie wiped tears from her face, words failing. Ethan exhaled slowly, a strange serenity in his chest. He had been wronged, yes, but now the ledger was balanced. Harold's final gift was not just property. It was clarity, justice, and the power to confront a family with truth. The storm outside had passed, but inside, a reckoning lingered like sunlight breaking through clouds. Back at the Cole family home, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Ethan stood in the middle of the living room, the documents from Harold's trust spread across the coffee table like a challenge. Margaret paced, fingers twisting a handkerchief, while Daniel leaned against the wall, silent but guilty. "You thought you could buy happiness," Ethan said, voice steady but cold. "You thought money could erase what you took from me. But it doesn't." Sophie stood behind their mother, eyes wide, trying to mediate. Margaret's lips quivered, then tightened. "I only wanted what was best for Sophie," she stammered. "At whose expense?" Ethan shot back. The house seemed to shrink under the weight of decades of favoritism, deceit, and unspoken resentment. Sophie finally stepped forward, her hands trembling. "Ethan, I didn't know. I never wanted this to happen. I love you, and I don't want us to fight. Ethan's eyes softened, though the hurt still lingered. You didn't ask, Sophie. You didn't see. That's the problem. She swallowed, tears spilling, voice barely a whisper. Then teach me. Show me how to make it right. He looked at her. He's looked at her, his breath steadying. It starts with honesty, he said, and it starts with them. The siblings' eyes met, a fragile bridge forming over years of neglect and favoritism. Margaret sank into the armchair, the tension of years collapsing into exhaustion. I thought I was protecting everyone, she said, voice cracking. I thought I was doing the right. Nathaniel finally spoke, voice low. We made mistakes. We let pride and appearances dictate our choices. Ethan watched silently, the anger tempered by understanding. You can't undo what's done, he said, but you can accept it. And maybe, just maybe, you can change. Margaret's tears fell freely. Daniel's eyes glistened. Sophie, 25, reached for Ethan's hand, anchoring the fragile moment. The family sat together, the documents now cleared, the air heavy with reflection. Words were spoken slowly, confessions whispered and acknowledged. Margaret admitted favoritism. Daniel admitted silence. Sophie admitted ignorance. Ethan listened, letting the hurt of the past settle like sediment. Truth is heavy, he said quietly. But it's the only thing that can lift us. The house felt lighter somehow, though cracks remained. They were beginning at last to confront their failings honestly, not for appearances, not for wealth, but for the fragile thread family still left to mend. Later that evening, Ethan stepped onto the porch, the wind rustling through the trees around the old property. He watched Sophie, helping Margaret adjust a shawl, Daniel standing quietly beside them. He realized reconciliation didn't erase betrayal and forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. But it was a start. Turning toward the fading sunset, Ethan whispered to himself, "This is where we rebuild." And somewhere, he imagined Harold watching, satisfied that the truth had finally done its work. Months had passed, and Ethan now lived in a small, modest apartment on the outskirts of town. His hands, calloused and steady, worked over a motorcycle engine, a quiet rhythm that mirrored the peace he had found in independence. The papers from Harold's trust lay neatly in a drawer, untouched but never forgotten. He wasn't rich, nor was he seeking revenge. He was simply free. Outside, the streets hummed with life, neighbors passing and greeting him casually. It was ordinary, but it was honest. In the reflection of the chrome gas tank, he saw not only himself, but the resilience his grandfather had instilled, a reminder that inheritance is more than land. It is the integrity that survives betrayal. One crisp afternoon, Sophie arrived at Ethan's apartment, hesitant but smiling. She held a small box of cookies, her eyes searching for a sign of welcome. Ethan looked up from the motorcycle, surprise flickering across his face before he softened. "I thought you'd forgotten me," she said. "I could never," he replied. They talked quietly, the conversation light yet weighted with unspoken apologies and understanding. For the first time since the wedding, their laughter felt real, untainted by expectation or resentment. The bond between them, though scarred, began to mend in gentle increments. More each. After cookies and conversation, they stepped outside onto the small balcony, overlooking the quiet street. Sophie leaned against the railing, and Ethan stood beside her. "Do you remember Grandpa's chest?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I do, and I remember what he said, that inheritance isn't just property." They shared a silent moment, the wind brushing past them, carrying both the memory of loss and the promise of renewal. It was simple, ordinary, but suffused with meaning. The bond of siblings, tested and tempered by truth, could still endure. That evening, Ethan returned to his apartment and opened a drawer to retrieve Harold's letter, now framed and placed on a small shelf. He read it quietly, tracing the familiar handwriting with his fingers. "What's yours cannot be sold," he whispered to himself, smiling softly. The words felt alive, a bridge across generations. He realized that his grandfather's wisdom had not only safeguarded a material inheritance, but had taught him patience, clarity, and moral courage. In that moment, he knew that redemption was not given. It was chosen every day, in every act of honesty and love. The story closes at the cemetery, where Ethan stands beside Sophie before Harold's grave. The wind stirs the grass around the weathered headstone, engraved with the years he lived and the lessons he left behind. They place flowers together, silent but united. A gesture of respect, remembrance, and reconciliation. Ethan speaks softly, more to himself than anyone else. "We did it, Grandpa. We found the truth, and we chose each other anyway." Sophie nods, a small smile forming, and together they walk away down the path, siblings reborn, the weight of betrayal lifted, carrying only the enduring strength of family and the clarity of conscience.